Yes. Hello, dear colleagues. We begin our 15 o'clock. We begin our press conference. Thanks to everyone who came. I would like to give a welcoming speech to Alexey Alexandrovich Volodykhin, Acting Director of GEOKHI RAS.
Dear friends and colleagues, I am very glad to welcome you to our renowned institute on behalf of all employees, all scientists. Our institute still holds a leading position in space exploration, and today I am grateful that you have visited our institute, found the time for this. Now the regulations of our event will be announced by Natalia Bizeva, Deputy Director for Public Relations. Natalia Sergeevna, please.
So we are planning an event for an hour and a half today. The first part of the event will be attended by 3 invited speakers. Kirill Alexandrovich Lorenz, Deputy, more precisely, Head of the Laboratory of Meteoritics and Cosmochemistry of GEOKHI RAS. Konstantin Mikhailovich Ryazantsev, researcher at the Laboratory of Meteoritics and Cosmochemistry of GEOKHI RAS, and our longtime friend and partner, Director of the Museum of the History of the Universe in Dedovsk, Sergei Viktorovich Petukhov, who largely thanks to whom our meteorite appeared at our institute. We're going to tell you about it today. This means that we will not have any questions during the speakers' speeches. After the end of the 3 performances, we plan to answer questions from the audience. At the same time, we will take questions primarily from media representatives. After that, we will conclude our press conference. You will have the opportunity to come up and take a close-up photo of the meteorite, if you haven't already done so. Here it is located on the stage. You can also come to me, and I will give you a link to Yandex. The disk is so that all the materials that we will show on the big screen you have in high resolution and can use to create your reports. In other words, we will give it to all accredited media that are in the hall, and then, at your request, we will make a press approach in the lobby of the conference hall, where microphones are already on display. Konstantin Mikhailovich Ryazantsev, who was directly involved in the search, will speak at the press conference. Please, the first report, Konstantin Mikhailovich Ryazantsev, a researcher at the GEOKHI RAS Meteoritics Cosmochemistry Laboratory, will tell about the search and how he managed to get this meteorite into the collection. Thank you.
Hello. It is very nice to see a large number of people. We are glad that there is such interest in this event. So, accordingly, I will tell you about how it all started, how the search took place, how we were able to get samples. It all started with the fact that on the morning of the 27th of October, the first messages began to appear. The first videos appeared here, you can see on the video. This is one of the first videos that was filmed from the territory of either Moscow or the nearest Moscow region. Here you can see how the fireball flies. It crumbles into a large number of fragments. And this was one of the first videos that I also saw. And since we have an interest, yes, in meteorites, we always track the fall of new meteorites accordingly. We immediately thought about what it is, and many experts in our field and astronomers and meteorite searchers are on this. The videos thought it was space debris that had fallen. What is the reason for this? This is due to the fact that the meteorite is here in a more slow-motion shooting mode. The meteorite very quickly fell apart into a large number of fragments. Here you can see them. At the same time, they still have such a characteristic gleam. At the end, it was possible to see it in this area. Now let's run the video again. That is, this is a large amount of debris, and a characteristic gleam. It actually resembled the fall of space debris. That is, some kind of old satellite, or a spent rocket stage, and many experts who have been searching for meteorites for a long time. They thought that it was space debris that fell after all, but I personally was somewhere 90% sure that it's a meteorite after all.
Был где-то на 90% уверен, что это все-таки метеорит.
So, here for comparison, you can see how space debris falls video. In general, space debris is characterized by the fact that the flight of objects here is slower. They are often followed by such a long plume. That's a lot of debris. Some of these parameters, they resembled our meteorite too. And it so happened that this video, it created the first video, gave the impression that he was not flying very fast. Although, in fact, later, it means that the speed was measured, it was still great. Here's another video of space debris falling. Accordingly, in principle, it is quite similar. Well, and this is how such a kind of reference space debris falls. Well, this is the fall of debris from the collapsed Starship spacecraft. Elon Musk launched during the tests. Accordingly, this is a very large object, and small objects, small satellites, they fall in principle, are similar. And here it is just visible that a large amount of debris appears, and these are the signs. They generally resembled space debris, so for comparison, the video of the Chelyabinsk meteorite falling means that it can be seen here, that it's a fireball, that it's flying, everything lights up, and it's one so big. Although fragmentation is visible here at the end, but in general, it flies with one big body that at some point explodes and gives this fragmentation here. Let's take another look. That is, here a body is flying, it then explodes, an explosion occurs, and you can see here fragmentation is already going on after the main explosion site. And in our case, as such, there was not much of a Big Bang. So the meteorite began to collapse almost before the explosion. This was later explained. So this is where I want to show. Accordingly, it all happened here almost on the first morning after the event. People began to remember how meteorites fall, how space debris falls, including we remembered about a very famous meteorite that fell in 1992 in the USA in the state of New York. It is called the Peekskill. This is a very famous meteorite because it became famous, among other things, because one of the fragments of this meteorite fell on the car and punched it, and it entered the 92nd year of such events. In general, they were still rare, that is, they are still rare now, but at that time it was quite rare. And here you can see how this meteorite flies over the stadium, or rather it flies far away. The shooting was conducted from the stadium, and you can see the fragmentation, which is very similar to our meteorite. Therefore, let's say after watching all these videos and analyzing them, we at least began to be more inclined in our laboratory that it really was a meteorite that fell, although many still, let me remind you, believed that it was space debris. Here again, you can see well, very similar to the fall of the meteorite Peekskill, the same fragmentation. Here's a little bit about this Peekskill meteorite. It means that on the 9th of October, 1992nd year, he fell. And here is the car that he damaged on the videos that were taken from this meteorite Peekskill. We are talking about Peekskill meteorite, so it was highlighted on the video that at least 70 fragments of individual, and actually most likely more of which were found one current. Actually, thanks to the fact that he fell on the car here is a sample, respectively, presented by himself. His weight is about 12 kilograms. Here is this car here, he punched it right through and was lying on the ground when he was discovered. And in general, this whole event that we are talking about now, it is very similar to just here. This is the fall of the meteorite peak skill, because there are also a large number of fragments, that is, 70 fragments. We also had a large number of fragments visible.
Тоже большое количество фрагментов, то есть 70 фрагментов было. У нас тоже большое количество фрагментов видно.
One fragment was found at the peak skill meteorite, which fell on the car. We also have so far found only one fragment, which, as many already know, fell on the roof of the house. I will tell you about this in detail, and the peculiarity of this meteorite was also that it flew about 700 kilometers from the place where its glow began in the atmosphere. Here we have 550 kilometers from the place of the glow to the place of the fall of a particular sample. That is, the distances are huge, the trajectory feature is flat. The meteorite flew for a very long time, and, accordingly, it turned out to be a very stretched ellipse, and plus in our case it also fell. Our meteorite fell on wooded areas difficult to search for, and in general, it is likely that no more samples will be found. That is, here is that one sample that miraculously fell on the roof of the house. It means it was found. There is a high probability that there will be no other finds. Although, most likely, the search will continue in the spring. Maybe something will be found. This is also a unique case for our meteorite. What I do not know is that this is not the only one, but this quality is probably the first time in history when a meteorite was removed from an airplane, and in very good quality. Very good video recording. Here too, fragmentation is clearly visible. You can see how individual fragments fly, and in the end, you can even see that there are several large fragments here. They are here. They merge there, but there should be about 5 of them. If you watch the video before that, there are enough large fragments. It is possible that the meteorite that was found is one of these most recent large fragments, and I will say again that this is a unique phenomenon, that the meteorite was filmed from an airplane and in good quality. And now, as these new videos appeared, which were received in general, it became increasingly clear that this was really a meteorite. It was not space debris, respectively. It was already necessary to think about whether it was worth going on a search. Also, the first proper signs that this is really a natural meteorite object is that the initial speed estimated from the video, which turned out to be small, actually turned out to be quite large in general. It is much higher than any speeds possible for space debris that enter the atmosphere, and actually, as it is calculated, the approximate starting point is determined from the video, where the meteorite began to glow, that is. This is some kind of this area where it went out. The ruler and trajectory are calculated accordingly. How much is it by distance? And divided by the number of seconds the meteorite flew.
Линейкой траектория, сколько это по расстоянию, и делится на количество секунд, сколько метеорит летел.
And according to the first estimates, when there was still no exact trajectory, people were not calculated, including from a very large popular science public, Astra Alert Stanislav Korotký, so they calculated the speed. It turned out to be around 17 to 18 kilometers per second, and it also became additionally clear that, in general, this is a natural object of space debris. There can be no such speed. Well, accordingly, we began to think about going to try to find him. A small digression. So here in the photo is my wife Camilla. The thing is that on November 5th she had a birthday, respectively. The meteorite fell on October 27th. They gave me a few days to process the data, and on November 2nd I left, so of course she was upset. But she let me go on a search, so I'm grateful to her for the fact that she, so to speak, understands that I am a geologist. Geologists often go on expeditions, but when it comes to searching for a meteorite, accordingly, the meteorite does not warn anyone where and when it will fall. Therefore, you need to be, in order to be the first, you need to be always ready to leave at any moment to search. And I am very grateful to my wife that she looks at it as if with understanding. So, they began quite quickly. Since the event took place in the central regions of Russia, a large number of video cameras. Then a large number of filming began to appear on the internet, among which there were shots quite well tied, with good bindings. That is, it was clear where they were shooting, in which direction the camera was looking. And in general different collectives, several collectives there not only in Russia, but also in the world of professional astronomers. They began to calculate the flight path of this meteorite. And here is the trajectory shown here, which we also used. This trajectory was shared with us by a team from the Ural Federal University. They also came. Although we only had to drive here for 5 hours, and they had to travel for 2 days, but they wanted to participate in the search. So we exchanged with them. These are professional scientists who are also engaged in meteorites. And we exchanged information with them. Among other things, Olga Popova, a leading researcher, calculated the flight path for them, and this is, let's say, well, we can say almost the exact trajectory that is currently available there. That is, the meteorite began to burn even before Rybinsk, so it was already clearly visible over the Rybinsk reservoir. He flew south of the city of Pestov. This was a question that we clarified on the spot. A little to the north of Borovichi he flew, and in fact the trajectory here it passes through. Well, here it ends, but it really extends, it can be extended. It goes beyond such a locality as Akulovka, which will also be discussed further. Here, accordingly, all these here are the trajectory is several hundred kilometers. But the main place where the debris is supposed to fall out as well, after Pestov, the Borovichi district, and the Akulovka district. That is, this territory is the place where, say, we expect that the main part of the fragments fell out. Although, due to the fact that a very wide ellipse began to collapse early on the meteorite, the scattering of samples will be. So, on the spot, we began to interview witnesses, look for events among eyewitnesses, and look for video camera footage. Which, well, in general, quite a lot are installed now, where this area is shown here a little behind. Well, here's the Pestov district. And here's the Pestov district. There are a lot of eyewitnesses here, too, who not only saw flashes in the sky, but also felt the arrival of a shock wave because the meteorite exploded. And it apparently exploded somewhere in this place in the area of the settlement is Ustyetskaya. And here is the line shown, it is 24 kilometers.
Ощутили приход ударной волны, потому что метеорит взорвался, а он по оценкам взорвался где-то вот в этом месте, в районе населенного пункта Устюцкая. И здесь вот линия показана, это 24 километра.
In general, we drove through all these surrounding settlements in the first few days, and here all the eyewitnesses say that here they are. The event itself happened at 6:32 in the morning, but many people were no longer sleeping. Someone directly even saw how there were flashes, and then an explosion came. That is, the explosion came in this area quite powerful here. In a radius of 25 kilometers, somewhere people felt. That is, some people they like witnesses say that they woke up at night. They woke up at night from the explosion. That is, the explosion was so strong that people at night, we woke up somewhere the windows were shaking, the roof was shaking in general. These are the impressions. Well, many thought that it was some kind of bombing or drones being shot down. Here. But later it turned out that it was a meteorite after all, although some people still. Well, maybe now it will be less when the reports come out, but when we talk to people, they said that this was just invented about a meteorite, but in fact we know that it means something, it exploded there. Here. Here's a video, one of the videos that we managed to shoot. We were able to get quite a lot of videos. This is a view from one of the surrounding villages in the Petukhov area, respectively. Here is a video. Here you can see how the first small flash occurs. Here is another small flash, and a stronger main flash. Such videos, despite the fact that the meteorite itself is not directly visible here, yes, they are useful because this explosion, and the flying meteorite in general, is so bright that it is a light source. And shadows appear on some objects from it, and from these shadows you can assess from which side the meteorite flew, how he was flying. To assess the height at which the explosion occurred or at which he flew here, but unfortunately in our case, it turned out that this is the brightest frame from this video here. For example, there are pillars near the pillars there. No shadows are visible. Here there is a shadow from the fence, but it is caused by this bright lantern that over-illuminates here in general. We collected a lot of very videos, and nowhere could we see clear shadows. This was due to the fact that at that time there was low cloud cover in the area, it was raining, and, accordingly, it turned out that the explosion occurred higher than this cloud cover, and it scattered the light. It turned out as if the whole sky lit up. So this created difficulties with clarifying the trajectory, because initially no one knew exactly the trajectory. So our first task was to interview witnesses and collect materials from a video camera in order to clarify all these things. But it turned out to be, let's say, more difficult because of this weather. Here in the photo, here is an example of how one of the eyewitnesses who directly saw the meteorite himself. He shows the direction in the sky where he saw the flash. Accordingly, this is the place where there was a flash. I marked it in the photo. That is, I conducted special work on the survey there. Photographed the area as an eyewitness saw where we were. We just specially came, if we met an eyewitness. We came to the place where he saw it. The person became, and here we showed, respectively. According to some landmarks, we have already looked at how more accurately it is located on the ground here, and in this case. These are photos from the city of Borovichi, and here the eyewitnesses respectively showed that the meteorite flew about in this direction. It was the main flash. Well, we realized from these data that the meteorite passed north of Borovichi. Here is all this information. It was generally useful. Here is another video. This is from Borovichi. It's in slow motion shot. Right now it's starting to become visible here as this meteorite appears, and there is a flash that is. Here is one of almost the only video that we could find where it was seen how the meteorite explodes. This is from the city of Burchi. There was such a cloud cover with gaps, and here in the upper part you can see how this meteorite just flies into the area of the camera, and the main flash occurs. And we also shared this data with our colleagues, sent them so that perhaps they would help in calculations. Here. Well, after we realized that we had collected all the information that we could, plus there were some calculations, we began, accordingly, to engage directly in searches. The peculiarity of the territory is that, well, more than 95% of it is a forest with swamps. Here it is shown how it looks like in places. The forest in general is quite good, but most of it is still quite overgrown, swampy. High moss, in which a stone, if it falls, it will simply drown in it. In general, the conditions for searching, of course, if we compare there, for example, with the Chelyabinsk meteorite, where there were much more fields in this case, the search on the ground is complicated by this landscape. That is, everything is much more complicated. There are a number of fields that fall into the area of the meteorite's passage, but most of them are heavily overgrown in the end. And it's really even more difficult to look there than in the forest. Well, here's my video means where I walk in the thickets of hogweed. Perhaps someone has already seen it in our Telegram channel. But in fact, despite the fact that the hogweed looks so scary twice as tall, but where it grows, there is less vegetation, or to look for it there, in fact, in general, even not bad. Here, another such episode from our searches. It means that in one place on the axis of almost the meteor's flight, there was such a large mud puddle, in the center of which a hole was found. Here is a hole means firm which it was very similar to a fallen meteorite. Well, there was nothing to do. I had to climb into this puddle in waders to lay a path there with branches so as not to drown at all and get it. There was a stone there. Here, but it wasn't a meteorite. That is, someone just threw a stone into a puddle. It is possible to joke about meteorite searchers. Well, in general, the joke was a success. We got him out of there. So, well, let's move on to the most interesting. A few days after the event, an ad appeared on Avito with these photos, where it was said that a meteorite fell in a locality in this area. That it broke through the roof. There was a photo of the roof with these, respectively, a roof with a hole, and with such streaks. Here is a photo of the sample. The sample photo was of very poor quality. There were several photos, but they were all of very poor quality. But according to this photo, respectively, the color rendering is completely different here, that is. Meteorites so naturally do not have such shades, and all this was well in low quality. And many thought it was some kind of nonsense because in the first streaks on the roof, they remind that it's already something old there. That maybe someone decided to either joke or just make a fuss under such an event, and put an old hole on the roof of the house there, as a fallen meteorite. There wasn't much to say from the samples either, but well, for me personally, I was also accordingly forwarded this ad to me. But I'm looking at this photo after all, it really resembles a meteorite, because there is this black one here, this is the crust. And the light one is the light part, which is characteristic of meteorites, just the light part. Therefore, well, we decided to immediately respond to this message and contacted people using this ad. After a while, other photos appeared. They did not appear through this ad in another way. And so they did not immediately get into the network at all. In general, they are still not very well known there. But according to these photos, we can already say for sure that this is 100% a meteorite. For a specialist, this is clearly visible. Here. Accordingly, I contacted directly on the ad and wrote that first I wrote, could you please take a better photo, that is, according to a high-quality photo, because, well, in principle, I can determine a meteorite from a photo. Here, but accordingly, the photo should be of fairly good quality. And people didn't react.
Люди не отреагировали.
Then there was an opportunity to call. It was all happening fast enough. That is, I received a message that there is this ad. I wrote, "We are still searching. The internet is not everywhere there. The connection is not everywhere." In addition, communication is jammed because there are a number of significant objects there, and therefore, both communication and the internet disappear. Well, in general, and if we go to the forest, we will remain without communication at all. Well, in general, on the way, let's say, driving into the field, well, in the field, I mean, into the forest for a field trip. I called people, they picked up the phone, we talked, they were 100% sure that they had a meteorite. We still did not have such confidence, but in principle, according to the description, it was possible to believe. But in any case, without better quality photos or, well, even photos, you cannot always attach any photos. That is, of course, you had to look at samples and, accordingly, I applied all my diplomatic abilities to explain to people that we are still connected with the Russian Academy of Sciences. We are researchers engaged in searches. We are here on the spot. We can drive up, if people. They immediately said that they want to observe complete anonymity. They do not want this place where they live to somehow get on the internet who they are so that it becomes known, respectively. I offered their different options for how this can be done. As a result, well, you can't talk endlessly. I sent them our paper from the institute with which we went, wrote who I am, so that they could look on the internet on their own about our laboratory, about our institute, about the Museum of the History of the Universe. He said that we are ready on any conditions in principle, which, well, can be discussed, at least to start with samples. You can go somewhere if you don't want it to be known where you live, and so on, and so on. In general, I sent the documents to people and we went to work. Accordingly, there was no connection afterwards. Here. So in the ad it was indicated that this is the Sushilovsky district, that is, it was them, well. People in general prepared quite well, they did not want to shine their place accordingly in any way. And they even indicated the wrong place where they live in the ad on Avito. Here is the Sushilovsky district, which is not far from the village of Okulovka. Well, accordingly, the information about this ad, it began to spread, and the Sushilovsky district is several villages there and well. On the same day, almost all the red roofs in this area were studied. And here in the photo is an example of one of the roofs, where it means there was such a piece of slate laid, which may have also covered some kind of hole. There are a crack in the roof. Well, in general, when we also went to inspect these roofs, we found that someone had already inspected potentially interesting roofs before us. That is, people in general did not keep their anonymity for nothing. Because it is now quite easy to find information on the internet, but here is a living example of how, even knowing only that the house has a red roof, you can organize searches and try to find a place. And since there were teams in the area that worked in general quite a lot, that is, there were at least 50 people looking for different teams. Some of them were connected with scientific organizations, some were not connected, someone represented, well, quite black diggers. Someone not quite black diggers in general, different people, well, everyone was very interested in where this roof is. So the next day, I contacted people again. By the way, the ad on Avito hung for less than a day and disappeared. And everyone immediately began to wonder why it disappeared, because people agreed that it means they have already done everything. Or maybe it's just them. It was some kind of joke. The ad disappeared there, or they were afraid that they would be found, and the ad disappeared. Here. In fact, as the finders told me later, Avito simply deleted the ad itself, because it decided that it fell into the wrong category. Here is no intrigue, so there was no such thing, and accordingly, I contacted them again. they said that we wanted. We looked at everything, we studied everything. We want to cooperate with you, and one of these phrases that was voiced. That is, because I wrote to people at the same time, about 15 people were in that including me. And they said that it was obvious that a person with a higher education was communicating with them. That's what played a role. And accordingly, we continued the search already in the Akulovsky district, and, among other things, went directly to the place. In other words, people told us where this place is. We arrived there. This is our team. Here are 4 people in principle. Then we drove up to another person. Here is the Akulovsky district against the background of the pointer. Accordingly, upon arrival, having looked at the samples, I had no doubt that this was a meteorite. These photos were posted in the Telegram GEOKHI. Here's a video you can watch, say, the largest fragment on which the bark has been preserved. By the way, he is represented here. We left it for the collection, for the meteorite collection at the Russian Academy of Sciences, because it is representative. It has a fairly large area with a crust, and we assume that it will be located here in our Museum of Extraterrestrial Matter. In the showcase of such historical samples, there is also a peak skill meteorite, about which I told you about the one that fell on the car, but there will be this meteorite too.
Метеорит, про который я рассказывал, который упал на машину, но вот будет и этот метеорит тоже.
At first glance, I couldn't immediately figure out what type of meteorite it was. There was no sign of Honder in it. It was strongly recrystallized. It reacted very weakly to the magnet, which is not typical for moping, and in general. There was hope that it might turn out to be a rare type of meteorite, but a moping. But subsequent studies, they still say, indicated that this refers to the type of 6 moping. Kirill Alexandrovich will tell you more about this. In addition to the fact that there were samples on the roof, the meteorite split. It first split on the roof itself. Then some of it was scattered around the yard. Here are small fragments shown here that we collected from the yard, including here such a snail is indicated here. After we collected the samples, we put them to dry, and then a snail crawled out on one of them. I filmed it too. Then we let it go. Here. Well, now about our roof. We have not advertised this information about the roof for some time, although, of course, it leaked, but no one had any additional photos. There was only one photo with Avito. Here. Here, by the way, is this photo, but here it is in good quality. I then asked to be sent to me in good quality. This is how the meteorite looked before it was taken from the roof. That is, it is also unique in fact, the uniqueness of this case is that all the stages are very well documented. That is, here is a photo how people discovered this meteorite directly on their roof. Here, by the way, you can see the ragged, sharp corners of a sheet of iron, and well, the meteorite itself, when it was taken out, it collapsed, so here it looks so much bigger, and the fragments are real, they are smaller. Well, yes. I couldn't help but take such a historical photo of myself as a souvenir selfie, with a hole in the roof from a meteorite. This is also a moment, because it all happened in conditions of such as if competition. And from different search groups, of course, everyone was trying to find out where this roof was, and whether there was really a meteorite. Information began to leak out that it really was a meteorite. We shared with someone then did not keep the information there. He told us, and in general, how such a funny moment was. That is, well, in general, such an atmosphere was like something out of a series of Jack London stories, when people are gold rush, all trying to find where is the deposit. That's because the point of falling of this stone itself, it helps to clarify the trajectory, and, accordingly, it helps in the future. Well, to find other samples that may be. Although, unfortunately, it did not help us, and not only us, that is, we shared this information with the Ural Federal Ministry. In other words, our team is 10 people together. We still could not find more other fragments. But all the same, this information was kept secret, but since it was somehow distributed there anyway. It means there was such an episode that we were driving. We had already agreed that we would remove this roof, since the event is unique. We wanted to dismantle the roof at the moment when we were already driving almost to the place. Somewhere for half an hour we had to go there. I got a call from Moscow, and they say Kostya has information. That a certain deputy who, well, is a real person who is interested in meteorite stones there, he has agreed. He is going to take the roof.
Человек, который интересуется, значит, там, камнями, метеоритами, он договорился, он едет забирать крышу.
Hurry up. So at first I didn't believe it, as if because, well, I talk to people, I see what kind of people they are and well, it just couldn't have been, so I say I don't think it's possible, it's some kind of legend or something like that, as it turned out later. It means one of the competing groups launched this kind of misinformation in order to try to find out, that is, it sounded like this. That here we have a person, he has already agreed, that's it, we're going. Let's join us, share information with each other, participate in the project, get some samples too. Here. Well, accordingly, it reached us through friends of friends, but it still turned out to be disinformation. But we accelerated accordingly when it was confirmed that it was really about the fall of a meteorite. Then another employee of our Meteoritics laboratory, Dmitry Sadalenko, came to us. Here he is, we are posing with a meteorite together, and we were also engaged in dismantling the roof together. So we are examining this removed sheet and a punched cut piece of slate, respectively. So it's interesting that there are pieces of a meteorite in the roof, here directly in the roof. That is, here in the photo you can see in a detailed approximation, it means that here are the broken boards from the impact. And these small pieces here are all meteorites, this little gray one is a meteorite, it's all such meteor dust. Also such a well, in general, a rare phenomenon. Well, here are a few videos of how it all happened. Here are some of them we have already posted in the GEOKHI channel. This is what it looked like when these scraps of a sheet of iron were initially squeezed out. Yes, there are pieces of the meteorite themselves. Here they are lying in the roof. This is how it looked like. Here's what's interesting. Now I'll run it again. Here's this part here. Yes, it's really a meteorite raid. Here's what was once taken according to the first photos, was taken for, well, some kind of dust there incomprehensible. It really turned out to be a raid from a meteorite, that is, it turned out to be quite fragile. And it really broke up very much almost into dust, some parts of it broke, and that's because it was raining that day. These streaks they arose, but people they closed this area with a shield respectively, and some of these streaks were preserved. And so we cut it all out accordingly and collected it, and it will be shown at the exposition of the Museum of the Universe. Sergei Viktorovich Petukhov will tell you about this in more detail. So, now here I wanted to show one participant where the fragment is there. Here it is clear that the fragment is one of the fragments. It cut through the roof additionally, that is, the impact in general was very strong. It's just like a cut here. Despite the fact that it is a stone meteorite, it is not an iron meteorite. It is fragile enough and collapsed. But it still had a sufficiently large penetrating force. Another video. This is already with a sheet of iron removed, cut out with this piece of slate. Also, here's a crumb, there's a crumb left. We left her like that. Then we cut out these boards right away, leaving these crumbs. It's all actually expositions in this form that will practically be presented. These are the crumbs that we managed to collect from the roof here. This video was also on the Gay channel. I haven't seen this video yet. This video looks like what's right there under the roof. And it turned out that the meteorite broke through the boards and flew a little more inside. That is, the fragments got inside. That's what's interesting. Here they are gray lying, right? Now there will be such a moment. Here it is. Here you can see that one of the fragments, again, despite the fact that it is a stone meteorite, it does not have sharp edges. It has driven into a tree, stuck in a tree, so I want to say that it is not for an external audience, but for an audience that is searching for meteorites and which, perhaps, will be activated after seeing these videos. That we did a good job, collected all the pieces, there was nothing left.
Эти видео, что мы хорошо поработали, собрали все кусочки, там ничего не осталось.
There is no need to look for a house because people actually worried that they would find out where they live, they would come to them. They would disassemble the roof, they would disassemble the house, and in general, as if this Russia could happen here. Well, that's why we were one of the conditions for obtaining all samples, was that we did not disclose information about the place and the finders. Also a video of which. Video with sound. This is exactly how the process of sawing out a piece took place. That is, here is a piece like this was cut out of an iron shield, and, in fact, this whole composition consisting of an iron shield. Of a layer of black slate and boards, it was dismantled and, accordingly, will be exposed now. These are the sawn pieces. This is how the already dismantled tree sawn. It cracked a little bit there because there was a complete crack here. But in general it is being restored there now, and in general, that is, we were able to remove it from the roof, even with the preservation of these fragments of the meteorite. Well, these traces are also a unique thing. Again, it rains in the region, now it's autumn. But these traces of meteorite dust have been preserved. In general, this is also, well, such a unique case, and so we continued to search. But it ended up snowing quite intensively right away, and it was no longer possible to look for more. And we went home. I want to say that the events of the roof meteorite falling on the roof of a house is a rare phenomenon, but still not unique in the world. This periodically happens with the development of technology, technical means of video photography. There are more and more of them. Such events are being recorded. That is, there are now several dozen of them in the world there. This has also happened in Russia. Here on this slide. This is a photo of the showcase of the Firstman Mineralogical Museum, where 2 episodes are also exhibited. The fall of a meteorite on the roof of houses, for example, the Kunashik meteorite. Here is the meteorite itself, and also a sawn piece of the house. The roof of the house is 1949th year of the fall, and here is another house with tiles. This meteorite yurtek is also this tile here. This is a broken one when a meteorite fell. But all the same, our event in question is unique in that it is very well documented. It attracted attention, that is. Meteorites are falling in principle, yes, but not everyone is covered like that. In other words, the last such major press conference we had was when the Chelyabinsk meteorite fell. That was 12 years ago. That's why all of this together, of course, first of all allows us to show the whole country this event. What is happening, to draw attention to the work of scientific institutions, to the study of extraterrestrial matter, to the study of space. So, of course, we tried to make this event known. And the last slide is most likely a meteorite. Other samples of this meteorite, they are 100%. But it will be very difficult to find them. That's if someone in the spring, it will definitely be possible to find something to look for, but accordingly. Because of the very long ellipse, it will be difficult for Russians to find something. And for people who live in the area, what are the main signs that the stone should have a black bark, and inside it should be gray and gray-green? At the same time, the stone is weakly magnetic, which is not typical in fact for meteorites in general. Meteorites are moping. Especially they should be more magnetic, but this one contains very little metallic iron, it is weakly magnetic. And the zone where this can happen is a find where it can be made. This is the trajectory. They can basically be found on the internet. They are quite well built. The distance from Petrographic to Okulovka, and a little beyond Akulovka, is no more than 8 kilometers wide. That is, people who, since they still go there for mushrooms and berries, hunters can meet someone. It is unlikely to help there for purposeful searches, but since people still live in the region, they go to the forest. They may accidentally meet a stone that will match these descriptions, and then you need to pay attention to it. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Konstantin Mikhailovich. Very interesting. We didn't hear everything either. Thank you for the informative report. Our next speaker, the head of the Laboratory of Meteoritics of Cosmochemistry GEOKHI, Ural Alexandrovich Lorenz, will talk about the results of the first laboratory studies of a meteorite at our institute.
Good afternoon. Thank you for attending our event. It is dedicated to such an enchanting event. This is a bright natural phenomenon that always attracts people's attention. It happened on the 27th of October. Oh, the year is wrongly simple. Well done. At 6:32 in the morning. This is one of the photos that are taken from the internet. Here is a video taken from Moscow. This is a frame from video cameras. The event was observed on a very large territory of the Russian Federation, mainly in the northwestern region. It was very clearly visible from Moscow in the Yaroslavl region. The meteorite flew from east to west over the territories, respectively, of the Vologda, Yaroslavl and Novgorod regions, where the fall actually occurred. Many experts from different countries took part in calculating the trajectories of this car. In order to determine the projection of the trajectory on the Earth's surface, determine the possible parameters of this celestial body, its speed, probable mass, and the nature of the debris scattering. This was all done by analyzing video recordings, as Konstantin Mikhailovich said. Here is a small list of those people, including from other countries, who were engaged in this important work. Thanks to this, a trajectory was built, or rather a projection of the trajectory was carried out on the Earth's surface. This is one of the options calculated by Yuli Goryachka, thanks to which it was possible to start searching already. As can be seen here, the fragmentation of the meteorite began approximately over the Rybinsk reservoir. at an altitude of 50 kilometers. So it ended with a fall here. This is Akulovka.
Закончилось падением. Вот здесь это Акуловка.
In the 21st century, 3 meteorite falls occurred on the territory of Russia, of which the Chelyabinsk Melancholy is the most famous, which fell on February 15, 2000 of the 13th year. The beautiful fall of the Ozerky Broom, which also caused a great public outcry, and a huge number of people devoted their time to the search.
Огромное количество людей посвятили свое время поискам.
Fortunately, it fell at a good time of the year in the summer. The weather was fine. So hundreds of people collected fragments of this meteorite.
Собирали фрагменты этого метеорита.
Well, the third meteorite is the one that we now conditionally call Akulovka by the name of the locality where it was found.
По наименованию населенного пункта, где его обнаружили.
In principle, all meteorites are named after the place of their discovery, if it is a large enough locality. Well, according to the old tradition, it is believed that a locality, in order to serve as the name of a meteorite, must have a post office. In other words, this suggests that the settlement is quite large. Well, it's just a tradition. There are many exceptions to this rule. Here, in hot pursuit, the meteorite substance arrived at the laboratory on November 10th in the form of 3 small pieces, which are shown here in this photo. From one sample that weighed to 2.3 grams, we made a polished plume.
Из одного образца, который весил 2,3 грамма, мы изготовили полированный шлиф.
The employees of our grinding workshop helped us, and even then, the preliminary study of the meteorite began.
Тогда началось предварительное изучение метеорита.
Part of the meteorite was turned into powder, crushed, and sent for various chemical analyses, the results of which will be later.
Анализы, результаты которых будут позднее.
On November 18th, our colleagues delivered larger fragments of a meteorite to GEOKHI, one of which is presented here. This is a view from 2 sides. As can be seen, the meteorite is covered with a melting crust and is a fragment of a larger individual specimen.
Представляет собой обломок более крупного, индивидуального экземпляра.
This is a photo taken with a large magnification. It can be seen that the melting crust is black, glassy, and has cracks here, which were formed after the meteorite fell on the roof.
Которые образовались уже после того, как метеорит упал на крышу.
The thickness of this melting crust is approximately, but it reaches even half a millimeter, which is due to the fact that the meteorite flew for a very long time compared to other meteorites.
Очень долго по сравнению с другими метеоритами.
That is, its fall was observed for 33 seconds. The trajectory of his flight was very gentle. It entered the atmosphere at an angle of about 10 degrees, that is, it was actually flying along the Earth, and therefore, such a thick crust of melting from interaction with the atmosphere was formed on it on a meteoritic scale.
Вот взаимодействие с атмосферой.
When we sought a small piece, in order to continue the study, we found that the meteorite is strongly fractured.
Метеорит сильно трещиноватый.
And these cracks, they were not formed due to the fact that he hit the roof, but this is his natural state.
Он ударился о крышу, а это его естественное состояние.
And this fractured structure was probably the reason that the meteorite crumbled into many fragments in the atmosphere.
Метеорит рассыпался в атмосфере на множество фрагментов.
Moreover, it is unusual that the first bright flash, which is actually related to the fact that the meteorite began to crumble.
Собственно, связано с тем, что метеорит начал рассыпаться.
It occurred at an altitude of 50 kilometers, which, generally speaking, is not typical for moping. Based on their physical and mechanical properties, the destruction of meteorites usually begins at a lower altitude.
Низкой высоте.
That is, the meteorite disintegrated precisely because, even with relatively little air resistance, the fractured body simply could not stand it and began to break up. This is an image of a microscopic preparation called a plume from a thin plate of a meteorite. A transparently polished plume was made, which can be studied with an optical microscope in transmitted and reflected light. This photo shows that the meteorite is composed of grains of transparent minerals, among which there is an interspersing of opaque so-called or minerals. In polarized light, we see that the meteorite is formed by alvin. These are bright, these are multicolored selections. Here are the paler grains with pyroxene. So, accordingly, the plagioclase has the darkest gray areas, sometimes striped. Plagioclase in this meteorite is also not very much compared to the rest of the melancholy. But perhaps this is due to the heterogeneity of the sample, and when we study other samples, we will get more representative statistics about its mineral composition. In the reflected light, the same section of the meteorite's surface, or rather its polished preparation, looks like this. These yellow, pale yellow inclusions are traily iron sulfide. This gray grain got into the photo. This is the mineral chromi from the spinel group. These light yellowish gray large secretions are the same silicates of olefin pyroxene. Here is a plagioclase. Here is also a plagioclase. The most striking inclusions are metallic iron with the addition of nickel. The so-called nickel iron. As you can see in this photo, there is very little of it, which is characteristic of this meteorite. When studying transparent preparations, we found that rare objects like these are found in the meteorite, which differ in structure from the main mass, which is composed of small grains. Probably, these are relics of chondrules. Chondrums are the main mineral component of meteorites forming the actual chondrite structure. Here is an image in an electron microscope. Here we also see that this object has a decent structure, and this is an example of chondrums that can be seen in the doldrums. This is a photo of another meteorite. That is, initially this object looked like this, and then, as a result of certain processes, it lost its outlines, blurred, but partially retained this internal striped structure. Such a chandra is called a grate or beam. Chondrites are generally called chondrites because they are composed of chondrules. Chandra are silicate balls of different sizes, which are actually immersed in this dark mass. These are smaller fragments and/or minerals. And strictly speaking, the classification of meteorites is petrographic. It is based more on the preservation of the chondrite structure. That is, the better the outline of the Honda is expressed, the less the meteorite is changed. For example, this is a photo of the third metrological type of moping. This is the most accurate. It is meteoritic and less susceptible to secondary processes, but the situation is that when the meteorite is on the parent bodies, they are affected by various processes. The parent bodies of chondrites were asteroids, planetesimals. They experienced internal heating, because of which the grains of silicates touching, they grew, lost their outlines, merged together, and gradually the moping substance loses its moping structure and turns into such a mass of silicate grains. This is typical for the most metamorphous chondrites. This type has the number 6. Our meteorite belongs to the petrological type since it has almost lost its handwrite structure, but contains a separate relic of chondrites. The signs of impact in this meteorite are very insignificant. In fact, this is only fracturing and rare areas of impact melting, which indicates that it is slightly hit. Generally speaking, meteorites are affected by shock processes throughout their entire history of being on the surface of asteroids. Since a large number of small bodies, of various sizes, which collide with each other in outer space near the Sun, move in orbits. And therefore, the surfaces of the parent bodies and meteorites are covered with regolite, as well as the surface of the Moon. In other words, this substance is finely crushed, broken into pieces, and of very different sizes, that is, from the field fraction to fairly large blocks. And, strictly speaking, there is a classification of meteorites according to the degree of impact metamorphism, but in this case, our meteorite was hit completely insignificantly. Its minerals were practically not damaged in collisions with other cosmic bodies. As for the chemical composition, the two main minerals of this meteorite, Libyan pyroxene, in their composition. That is, in terms of the content of the ferruginous component of olivine and pyroxene, fall into the area of L-handrites. These are meteorites that are characterized by the fact that they have quite ferruginous silicates compared to other meteorites, ordinary melancholies of the L group and the H group. In addition, they contain metallic iron enriched with nickel and cobalt, but this iron is usually very small. Our meteorite, the Akulovka meteorite, contains about less than 0.1%. But we counted 0.05% of metal in the slot that we have. When we make more grinds, we will be able to calculate the percentage of metallic iron in more detail. But this will not change the result of our initial diagnosis. Thus, the meteorite belongs to the ordinary doldrums of the chemical group. His petrological type is the sixth, that is, it is L6. Shock stage C2 is very slightly hit. And the last parameter that is used in the classification of meteorites is the degree of terrestrial weathering. That is, how much the meteorite was exposed to terrestrial factors such as the atmosphere of the hydrosphere. But since our meteorite is a fall, accordingly, it was practically not affected by being on Earth, except that due to rains. While the meteorite was in the fresh air for a whole week in the air, the metal gradually began to oxidize in it. And an electron microscope shows that thin films of rust grow on the metal grains. When our colleagues astronomers analyzed the orbit of this meteoroid before entering the Earth's atmosphere, it turned out that the orbit of this body, from which our meteorite eventually turned out, belongs to the asteroids of the Apollo group. In other words, these are near-Earth asteroids, asteroids approaching the Earth, whose orbit, when approaching the Sun, it goes inside the Earth's orbit. Due to this orbit of the Earth, and this is the orbit of our meteorite specifically, which was calculated by colleagues. And this cloud as a whole is an approximate main part of the meteor asteroids of the Apollo group. Here, well, since this meteorite is approaching, or rather these asteroids are approaching the Earth, small fragments are often separated from them, which are captured by the gravitational field of the Earth and fall out in the form of meteorites. But it is interesting to note that, For example, Petukhov asteroids belong to the Apollo group. This is the first asteroid from which soil samples were obtained to Earth by the Japanese Hayabusa apparatus. And it turned out during the study that it has a composition and a relief exactly the same as the Akulovka meteorite, and exactly the same as the Chelyabinsk meteorite. That is, in general, here we observe that astronomical observations and observations in the laboratory converge. Since observations using telescopes that record the spectrum of sunlight reflection from the surface of asteroids indicate that indeed the surface of the asteroids of the Amur group, the Apollo group, it is composed of L-handrite substance. It should be noted that meteorites of the L group are quite rare, that is, they account for about 10% of all falls of ordinary chondrites on the Earth's surface. That is, some statistics from the Meteorite Bulletin are presented here. It is known that there are 13 falls of REL moping in the world. There are 3 of them on the territory of Russia, including Akulovka. These melancholies are interesting because, for some unknown reason, various exotic inclusions are found in L-yandrites much more often than in other types of chondrites. These inclusions are understood as fragments of meteorites of various types, both carbonaceous and ordinary. But there are also fragments of chondrite handrites of unknown types that are not yet represented as meteorites in collections. And therefore, from this point of view, of course, there is a certain prospect for studying our meteorite as well. In conclusion, I want to note the significance of meteorites, for which this substance is generally studied. Firstly, the study of meteorites is of fundamental scientific importance, because in this way we get an idea of the past, of the distant past of the solar system, of the composition of matter, of small bodies that we cannot yet reach. And including the composition of the substance from which our planet Moon, Mars, Mercury originated, that is, the planets of the Earth group, which are now studied only remotely with the exception of the Moon, from which we receive matter periodically. Well, that's probably all I wanted to tell you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ural Alexandrovich. And we turn to the last report of our press conference, and the floor is given to Sergei Viktorovich Petukhov, director of the Museum of the History of Natural Science in Dedovsk, who contributed to the fact that this meteorite got into GEOKHI RAS. He's going to tell us everything now. Please, Sergei Viktorovich.
Hello, dear friends, dear colleagues. So this event is unique in many ways, as has already been said by previous speakers. Our colleagues made great reports about this particular meteorite, but I would like to stand on our museum a little bit. And that means our Museum of the History of the Universe. We have existed for 20 years, and for all these 20 years, we have been fruitfully cooperating with the Meteoritics laboratory. Because one of the parts of our museum is, in particular, the meteorite collection. So, it means that our museum is private, and its teachers were graduates of Moscow State University, MRIMT all geologists. And accordingly our museum is in many ways like a geological one, and due to the fact that the history of the universe has already numbered 13 to 8 billion years for 14 billion years. Accordingly, in our museum, we will try to present this case in different moments of the exposition. Yes, you see, we have a position starting from the moment of the Big Bang and ending with the appearance of a person here. So the museum consists essentially in its own way it is such a time travel ship. It consists of 4 main showrooms, the first cabin. We demonstrate just the Big Bang and the features of the appearance of the matter of our solar system. The second hall is dedicated to meteorites. We have a very large collection of meteorites. In particular, all the main groups of meteorites are represented, where, let's say, visitors can carefully inspect the exposition. And cooperating with the Meteoritics laboratory, we are doing a lot, let's say, so that the new meteorites that are found, they fall into our Academy of Sciences and are well represented. So the next department we have is exactly the Earth, our third compartment. So, this is a conversation about the origin of the Earth, about its mineral composition, about the processes taking place on Earth. The fourth department, well, probably the largest one, yes, it is a paleontological department, in which there is a discussion of the origin of life on planet Earth. As we all know, our planet is famous for what? That's right. This is the only planet of the known planets both in our solar system and exoplanets of other star systems that are studied by astronomers and on which life exists, and in particular our last compartment is dedicated to illuminating the processes of, let's say, the formation and development of life on planet Earth. Here. So we have a lot of related different materials that we show ourselves, which means plus everything. Due to the fact that we cooperate a lot with different, let's say, federal and municipal museums. We participated in the formation of the exposition, for example, the Moscow Planetarium. The Meteorite exposition of the Moscow Planetarium in many ways. Well, they also participated in the formation of the exposition of other museum organizations. We work a lot with children. We support the children's geological movement, in particular in the Moscow region, in Moscow. We have recently opened in a new room. In particular, here you see a new room for just a year and a half. In particular, here are our results. It may not be very impressive in relation to Moscow, but for the Moscow region, it is quite impressive. Here again, here we can see what? We can watch a very interesting moment here with you, due to the fact that we very often do interactive such trips. And in particular, you see, so to speak, our children can touch meteorites and touch all these things. Because interactive is very important for educational processes and for people to see it. Well, there are also adults who see this case. We have a museum, a theater, many different events are taking place. Here. Well, now we will return to what it was all about. Due to the fact that we are an independent organization, we can afford to finance some moments. And cooperating with the Meteoritics laboratory, we participated in various expeditions. Participated in co-financing, in joint expeditions. There have been many expeditions to different parts of our planet, and this is, let's say, North Africa. The desert territories of the Middle East, the desert territories of the Americas, which means that in the 18th year, the museum sponsored the annual conference of the International Meteorite Society in Moscow, which was held in Moscow and, in particular, organized. This conference was organized at the GEOKHI Meteoritics laboratory. Again, with regard to the last meteorite, with our direct participation, there were questions about agreements with people who were lucky or unlucky. So let's say that a rather large space object flew into their roof. We also acted as those people who negotiated with these people. Here. Accordingly, part of this cosmic substance, it came to us in the museum in the form of a meteorite. That will most likely be called Akulovka, and that's what was connected with taking the roof. And from today on, our museum exhibits exactly what was taken from the roof of the house in Akulovka. So we supplemented this exposition with, let's say, another roof in the 19th year. On the 14th of September of the 19th year, there was also a similar event in the village of Iznosovo in the Tambov region.
14 сентября 2019 года в Тамбовской области в деревне Износово тоже было подобное событие.
A small meteorite fell into the meteorite, less than 300 grams, but very hard, and it damaged the seam roof, and made a dent in it, and at the same time, what is most surprising, this meteorite did not break. And in particular, starting today, for the first time, we are demonstrating 4 visitors to the public to pierced roofs. One from the village of Akulovka, and the second from the village of Iznosovo. And welcome to visit our museum. Dear friends, thank you for your attention.
Sergei Viktorovich, thank you very much.
We often carry out cooperation with the Meteoritics laboratory, so that we are planning an expedition to Pakistan in the near future. And we hope that new material will also be brought from there. Thank you.
Sergei Viktorovich, thank you very much. Colleagues, please note that the Museum of the History of the Universe in Dedovsk is open in general on all working days, but today from 18 to 21, they are waiting for representatives of the press and guests, employees of the Institute, and also tomorrow, from 11 to 18, it will be possible to visit this museum and see this famous fragment of the roof, a larger number of samples of our meteorite, and accordingly, also communicate with search engines, including Konstantin Mikhailovich, who returns to the hall to start a question and answer session. So, how do we continue to work? Now we will answer the questions from the audience sitting at the podium. As soon as these questions are over, we will stop the online broadcast, and then we will have a press approach in the lobby of the conference hall. But first, we start with the answers to the questions. Please, we have a microphone. We have Irina, who helps with the microphone. Please, questions. Yes, Natalia Vladimirovna, of course, a Moscow Komsomol member. Microphone, check, please. Hello again. I want to congratulate you on such a find. This is really a very important event, very loud. I have such a question, but since I have already written a lot about this meteorite, I have clarifying questions. What was the body like before entering the dense layers of the atmosphere? Here you can specify according to your calculations. And how and what we see now, please specify these dimensions too.
Well, let me answer. The fact is that we didn't count anything ourselves. All calculations are carried out by our colleagues, astronomers, and according to their estimates. The size of the body before entering the atmosphere was about 1 meter, but the mass is probably several hundred kilograms. The fact that we see such a small fragment as the only meteorite that has fallen out, so far discovered, suggests that it is more precisely a consequence of the fact that the meteorite was strongly crushed in the atmosphere. And since it flew very gently along a gentle trajectory, a very long scattering ellipse turned out, respectively. Along a line about 100 kilometers long, all fragments fell out. Here I have answered your question.
How much did you find in total?
Well, in total, according to Konstantin Mikhailovich, about 500 grams of meteorite were found.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? We don't see any more questions. Natalia Vladimirovna, please. And here's another thing that interests me. Is it listed in the International Bulletin of Meteoritic Matter?
Well, we have almost finished the work on drawing up the application, and we will send it soon. I think that the nomenclature committee will vote fairly quickly, because there is a very obvious situation with both the classification and the circumstances of the fall. So probably soon the meteorite will find its official name and place in the International Meteorite Catalog.
Can I have some more? Yes, of course. From other countries. From other countries. Yes, colleagues have seen him somewhere, maybe in Europe.
Kostya, maybe? Do you know if he was observed somewhere on the other side of the border? I don't think so. Here is a rather noticeable video from our country from Petrographic tomorrow. It's already flying at the horizon level, it turns out. And if we take the European direction, then since he was flying from east to west, he flies at them, he flies at them. And in the projection, it turns out just like a glowing dot. This is no longer very noticeable, and because of the correspondingly large distance, most likely there was nothing visible there. That is, already in the area actually beyond Borovichi in the west, evidence is already beginning to decrease there. Eyewitnesses did not see this event so vividly. If you follow the trajectory, well, it's very far from Western countries there. But it's just that the area is central Russia, and there are huge spaces all around. We saw our foreign colleagues, probably only on video.
Well, I probably have one last question. Well, you don't call the owners of the house, well, for obvious reasons, but you can at least reveal the story. Did they see him fall? Did they hear? Did he wake them up at night? Or did it happen in some other way?
Listen to a very good question, because it all happened quickly. I didn't have time to add this moment to the report. Although there are interesting things there, so you asked, I'll take this opportunity to tell you so people at the moment when he fell. It was there at 6:30 in the morning, they were already awake, and they heard a very strong rumble. And they thought that the neighbors had something there that had fallen so big, there or the car had moved somewhere into a ravine, so there. Well, in general it was very loud. Well, they were kind of scared of it, yes, but they didn't pay much attention the next day. Or rather, on the same day it turns out, they went out into the yard in the morning, and they saw that some cement was scattered in the yard. This one that it broke into fine dust, crumbs, it scattered around the yard. And they saw in some places that it was as if cement was poured. And they even thought that maybe the children were playing there. They scattered something there. Now it's necessary to clean up now. And 2 days later, only there is such an angle that in general this zone is not very clearly visible. And only 2 days later, it so happened that the hostess was from such a side that she saw there's a spot on the roof. And then they decided to take a look, climbed in and saw that there was a stone there. And they were still in the news at this point. Well, as if they hadn't seen that a meteorite had fallen, that is, they didn't know about it, so they just saw that a stone was on the roof. And the first thought, as she says, was that some bird had thrown off, he fell a stone on the roof, but the stone is quite large. So they started discussing this somehow, and found out that, after all, there was such an event, a meteorite just the other day. And then they had a puzzle that although he was a meteorite from them, he was still seen more in the Pestov area or where he was flying. That is, he flew in one place and fell in another, but they connected these events, realized that it was a meteorite. Looked at photos on the internet. There are some pieces with bark that are very good. Yes, here we have a piece of bark that is very good. And they realized that it really is a meteorite. That's the way it is. In other words, these are the circumstances.
Yes, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, please, microphone.
Along the way, here were fragments photographed separately. So there they were. It's from the same hole in the roof, right? Yes, it's all the same fees. And they just took them out and photographed them, right? Well, these are just the first samples that came to our laboratory. Yes, they are the ones photographed at our institute. Clearly, thanks. It just broke a sample of a lot of quite small fragments. There's a whole bunch of cracked material, and there was a strong impact. That is, it's just some kind of this raid on the roof. It's just, well, dust practically, yes, to such an extent.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I can do it without a microphone. And tell us about the planes, please. Is the flight known from where to where it flew? The flight is known. It is even known as the name of the stewardess, but unfortunately I will not say it for memory, that is. It is possible to find a specific flight on the internet. A specific person took this lady stewardess right off the plane. In my report, a screensaver was used. This is a frame from a video taken from this plane, from this flight. In my opinion, this is the author's name, Anna Spasskaya, if I'm not mistaken. I have it signed there. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you. Any more questions?
To Sergei Mikhailovich, he is a little playful. Whether the roof has been restored, and at whose expense. You know, this was one of the very important components of actually talking to the owners of this house, yes. Of course, the roof was restored at our expense. So that's it. I want to add that the roof has been restored so that no one will understand that a meteorite once fell there.
That is, it does not differ in color if the drones shoot from above. Yes, nothing is visible there. Yes. Any more questions, please?
Please tell me, but these samples here, other laboratories and museums can somehow get exposed for research. Thank you. Yes, of course. Of course they can.
Any more questions?
But as already mentioned, some of the material got into the Federal State University named after Yeltsin, and named after the first president in Yekaterinburg. And in particular, samples have already been sent to various institutions for study.
Well, that is to date. The samples found are in 3 organizations. This is the GEOKHI and we have here. We are now exhibiting them to you here. This is the Ural Federal University, the scientific group of Grokhovsky Viktor Iosifovich, and this is the Museum of the History of the Universe. These 3 organizations have samples and, accordingly, work with them, study them. Any more questions? We don't see any more questions. Let's comment on it and answer the unasked questions more precisely. We are often asked questions about the price of meteorites. Look, we, of course, are not engaged in commerce and the Academy of Sciences, but there is a meteoric market, and there are qualified suppliers. Meteorites of this kind, that is, ordinary mopes, cost from 10 to 1,000 rubles per gram, depending on the fall, on the value of the meteorite, on the media coverage, and so on. 1,000 rubles will already be the Chelyabinsk meteorite, which is very sensational. That is, when you see a Moscow meteorite for 40 million rubles on Avito. It's a fake meteorite, so much it's not worth it once, and it's not a meteorite 2 at all, much less Moscow 3. So be careful and buy meteorites if you need it from trusted suppliers. For example, stones from the sky we have here. Yes, the store director. Here he sells real meteorites. Thank you. Any more questions? No more questions. There is. Let's do it again, okay? This one. They bought it or the owners gave it to the needs of science after.
You know, unfortunately, the times of probably such silverlessness have passed for many people, and many people, of course, as if they want to receive compensation. In particular, as you can see, the meteorite caused damage in principle, although it broke through the roof. This is a definite job, yes, let's say, for people. Therefore, of course, the meteorite was bought.
Well, look here. We have already announced this too, and now we have told the microphone that we received the meteorite on a reimbursable basis. But of course we do not disclose all the conditions. These conditions are strictly confidential. It was an agreement with the owner.
Yes, of course, the owners asked not to, let's say, not to develop, and not only to respect their anonymity. But plus, let's just say, they would not want to make public the amount for which it was purchased.
Any more questions? Can I get a microphone in there, Irina? Svetlana Komarova. I wanted to ask such a scientific and astronomical question. You said that according to approximate estimates, here is the meteorite itself. The body itself that hurts was about 1 meter in diameter. And where do astronomers somehow assume in general where did it come from? It's well, maybe it was seen somehow before it flew. Or is it such a small object that, as if it is not very noticeable in astronomical everyday life in principle? Now, for example, in the United States of America, there is a program for observing near-Earth asteroids. It consists in the fact that groups of telescopes of different types observe near-Earth space in order to fix approaching small bodies that can enter the Earth's atmosphere, and, accordingly in general, by and large, this program is aimed at getting information about possible dangerous approaches of celestial bodies to the Earth.
В общем-то, по большому счету, эта программа направлена на то, чтобы получать информацию о возможных опасных сближениях небесных тел с Землей.
And there was information, but I personally saw, in my opinion, on the Izvestia website, that the American observation facilities marked the asteroid. It was even assigned some kind of identification number. But for some reason information about its orbit and how it passed through the atmosphere did not appear on the network. Although in principle there are satellites that they photograph bright flashes on the Earth from above, including when fireballs enter the atmosphere, and there are even publicly available maps of these bright events. You can see how almost the entire surface of the Earth is collided with cosmic bodies of different sizes almost every day.
Практически вся поверхность Земли практически каждый день подвергается столкновению с космическими телами разных размеров.
In other words, in principle, this meteoroid was probably observed before entering the atmosphere, but, unfortunately, there is no data on this. But on the other hand, our fellow astronomers were able to calculate its orbit around the Sun, which made it clear that this asteroid belongs, more precisely a meteoroid, belonged to the Apollo asteroid group, that is, it is an asteroid approaching the Earth. That's probably all that can be said.
Thank you for more questions, Egger. You wanted to ask. And there is a question here. Can I have a microphone here? Yeah. I wanted to.
You know, I don't have a question. I would like to share. Well, share how to determine if it hurts falling, or if it's space debris. You can literally take 2 minutes.
And please imagine.
Well, I have Sergei Gareev, a lover of astronomy, and so my brother and I came to the city of Dolgoprudny. We have been doing astronomy for 40 years, namely observational astronomy. That is, we follow meteors, fireballs. And that is, we have accumulated quite a lot of experience observing meteor fireballs. And we can very well tell how to distinguish a meteorite from space debris.
Well, let's listen to you for 2 minutes, but then we reserve our right to comment on everything you say from your point of view. Yes, if possible, we will disagree with you. Let's.
Yes, that is, look at any spacecraft. Yes, well, many have been to VDN. That is, many have seen how our satellite rockets are made up. That is, any spacecraft has a satellite. Yes. They do not have huge, large monolithic parts like a meteorite. That is, this meteorite according to the assumption. It was a cubic meter there. Yes, that is, well, roughly speaking, like this bedside table, but from the speakers. That is, well, it's a big piece flying, and you can see from the first video. I even without a doubt immediately determined that it was a meteorite, that it could not be space debris. That is, any spacecraft when it enters the layers of the atmosphere, it has no large parts, and it crumbles immediately into small parts. And that is, even the correction engine itself, the satellite braking engine, it consists of tubes. There is a nozzle, something else, and even falls asleep into small parts, and at the time of flight they do not explode. That's how you can see from the car that it's flying, it's crumbling into pieces, and every fragment it all explodes. That is, it's clear that this is a very large monolithic body, and it's so easy to determine what it is exactly. That it hurts exactly a large body, and not some kind of space debris, even when the Mir station was flooded. Yes, there are a lot of videos on the internet, that is, it immediately broke into small parts. And a lot of small parts, yes, they fall. First of all, their speed is also slow, and they have such long tracks, and everything consists of small particles, that is, a meteorite. They do not fall like that. Here is a meteorite, but it flies like a piece, that is. You can even see that it is quite a long distance from the Moscow region, and it is clear that it is a large piece that flies. That is, it burns, and it turns out that it's clear that it can't be a satellite of some kind. Some kind of stage spent there, or something else there, and so it's easy to determine whether it's a meteorite or space debris. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Comment.
Yes, I want to comment that since the videos were released well in portions, then here is the first video that came out on it. Even astronomers with whom we communicate and who are engaged in both search and observation, they did not all consider that this is a natural object. Many thought it was space debris. So it's still such a non-standard situation for specifically this car. When more videos came out, it became quite clear that it was definitely a meteorite.
You know, there are even many of us here. That is, there were many statements in the media that it was space debris, and only Konstantin Mikhailovich did not believe all this and went to look for it. So the question here is, yes, well, there are different situations, but thank you for your comment. Any more questions? Please. There are no more questions. Thank you all very much for your participation. The press conference is over. The press approach is in the lobby. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.